Coming up today, continuing her state visit to France, President Park Geun-hye is set for summit talks with her French counterpart François Hollande in Paris. Economic cooperation will top the agenda. South Korea says there will be no talks on the controversial deployment of a US missile defense system during an upcoming meeting of the two nations' defense chiefs. First, looking to clear the air, the Korean government holds talks on combating fine dust, a problem that seems to be worsening by the year. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 3rd of June. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We are going to start in Paris, where President Park Geun-hye is set for summit talks with French President François Hollande. South Korea and France are celebrating the 130th anniversary of bilateral ties, but the leaders also have plenty of important topics to discuss at this time of economic uncertainty and security fears. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-son reports from Paris.
A stepping stone for greater economic cooperation in the future. That is how South Korea will approach Friday's summit talks between President Park Geun-hye and her French counterpart François Hollande. Seoul is keen to guide the vision of a comprehensive partnership for the 21st century, sealing stronger ties for mutual growth in the years to come.
The most notable aspect of the summit is that South Korea and France have established an optimal partnership for the creative economy and cultural prosperity, which will be a foothold to foster future growth engines.
Seoul and Paris will co-produce broadcasts and cultural contents, enhance cooperation in bio, ICT, energy, and nanotechnologies through joint research and projects. To shore up trade and investment, the two sides will set up more communication channels and tighten the implementation of Korea-EU free trade deal, which came into effect 5 years ago. Seoul will also request permanent membership of the 20-member Paris Club, an informal group of creditor countries that provide debt treatments to debtor countries. This will be a notable achievement since South Korea found itself buried in debt following the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s. North Korea will be another major agenda as France, a permanent member of the UN Security Council and a leading EU member, is a vocal opponent of a nuclear-armed North Korea. Global issues like climate change will also be discussed in line with the UN climate conference held in Paris late last year. From a creative economy drive to pressuring North Korea, President Park will set a new vision of economic and security cooperation through summit talks on Friday, ahead of the 130-year anniversary of diplomatic ties on Saturday. Song Ji-son, Arirang News, Paris.
Now, South Korea and France have been strong economic partners for decades. For more on where the two countries stand today, as well as the potential for Seoul and Paris to take their business relations to a whole new level, Kim Min-ji reports.
Korea and France have been active at promoting exchanges in various fields, from culture and business to healthcare and energy. The two countries signed a treaty of friendship, commerce and navigation back in 1886, marking the start of their diplomatic relations. But despite their long history, bilateral trade has been at a relative standstill in recent years. While total trade has been up 4% annually over the past 10 years, Korean exports to France have fallen an average of 2% every year during the same period.
Korea's main export items to France, such as ships and mobile phones, dropped due to the slump in the overall European economy. But on the brighter side, growth in France seems to be picking up.
As for investment, Korea invested over $2 billion in France as of last year, while Paris has invested $7.3 billion. Over the past 5 years, Seoul has stepped up investment in manufacturing and Paris in the service sectors.
More and more companies contacting our services because they're interested into investing into Korea or interested into selling their products and services to the country. Before it was mostly, in general, I would say, centered between capital cities, and now people are looking beyond these capital cities. There's more cooperation between other cities, as for instance, this French investment like Veolia in Incheon, for example, in Daegu.
Down the line, the general consensus is that prospects are bright and many see room for further development and synergy in increased fields.
We are in an extremely positive momentum of bilateral relations. France has always been promoting a partner-oriented approach in Korea. We are willing to develop some new sectors, for example, in the auto industry, with the intelligent car, new technologies, e-health, nanoelectronics, and so on.
Experts say Korea should actively make use of its free trade agreement with the European Union. The deal puts the country at an advantage over global rivals like Japan and China, which have yet to ink trade deals with the European bloc. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, a series of Korean cultural events has also been launched in France to complement the president's visit, from exhibitions and performances to what's being billed as the world's largest K-pop concert. Lee Ji-won has more.
K-pop stars including SHINee, Block B, and more were in France on Thursday night to kick off the week-long K-Con festival. The concert hall in Paris was jammed with K-pop fans from around Europe who were singing along and screaming themselves hoarse. Billed as the world's largest K-pop concert, it was organized to celebrate the 130th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Korea and France. And in a sign of the significance of the occasion, the stage was momentarily given over to a special VIP guest, President Park Geun-hye. The Korean leader is in France on a state visit, and she used the event to highlight the importance of cultural events and exchanges between the two countries. In her remarks, she said that it was K-pop events like these that are helping to make Korean culture known to people around the world. At the event, part concert, part expo, she and pop group SHINee even took a moment to sample some Korean treats.
세계적으로 인기를 끄는 샤이니에서 이렇게 이런 걸 소개하고 그러니까 아마 붕어빵이나 여기 디저트들도 인기가 폭발하지 않을까.
K-Con is just one of the cultural events organized to coincide with President Park's 4-day stay in France. The convention is a 7-day music and cultural event being held in 9 major cities, including Paris, Nantes, and Nice, to highlight both traditional and contemporary aspects of Korean culture. Other cultural events during the president's visit include events giving French people a taste of Korean dramas and movies, fashion and food, and festivals featuring classical and contemporary Korean music, such as pansori musical storytelling and 사물놀이 percussion performances. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, in the rest of the day's news, there are conflicting reports on whether the defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States will hold discussions on the deployment to South Korea of a US missile defense system known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD. The officials are scheduled to meet this weekend at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. Connie Kim with the details.
The South Korean government says the potential deployment of the U.S. missile defense system will not be on the agenda at talks this weekend between the defense chiefs of the two allies. Seoul's defense ministry was forced to issue a denial after U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter said he expected the issue of the THAAD deployment to come up during his meeting Saturday with South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu. Carter had told reporters that THAAD was not something the two allies needed to discuss too much because the plans were already in motion. He also emphasized that the deployment was an alliance decision. Shortly after North Korea launched a long-range ballistic missile in early February, the two allies announced it would officially enter negotiations for the deployment of the defense system that can counter the growing missile threats posed by Pyongyang. A joint working group for the THAAD deployment launched in early March, and the two sides have been discussing the possible location, costs, and environmental issues of the system. Neither South Korea nor the United States have revealed any details of how far talks have progressed thus far. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A number of UN member states have submitted their action plans for implementing the latest Security Council resolution on North Korea. More unilateral measures by individual countries are beginning to take shape as well. Kwon So-ah reports.
South Korea, the US, the UK, Japan, Russia, and Monaco are among the roughly 10 countries that have submitted implementation plans for UN Security Council Resolution 2270 imposed on North Korea for its nuclear and missile tests earlier this year. The 193 UN member states were to submit reports on how they would follow through with the toughest ever sanctions on Pyongyang within 90 days of the resolution's adoption. Russia announced Thursday it is strictly abiding by the resolution and fine-tuning a presidential executive order on the issue. Earlier this week, South Korea's foreign ministry revealed its own action plan and the measures taken so far, which include the suspension of the Inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex. Other individual sanctions are taking shape too, with the EU having recently adopted financial restrictions set to include a ban on transactions with North Korean institutions amounting to more than 15,000 euros. In line with this, the UK Treasury designated North Korea as a primary money laundering concern on Thursday, after the US made the same designation the day before. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, the United States has left North Korea off its list of state sponsors of terrorism for the 8th consecutive year. The State Department's Country Reports on Terrorism 2015 said North Korea is not known to have sponsored any terrorist acts since the bombing of a Korean air flight in 1987. The North was put on that blacklist in 1988 for the bombing that killed all 115 people on board, but was taken off in exchange for denuclearization talks in 2008. However, there have been growing calls for redesignating North Korea as a terrorism sponsor since Pyongyang was found responsible for the 2014 cyber attack on Sony Pictures. OPEC's latest meeting in Vienna wrapped up without an agreement on oil production limits. That outcome didn't really come as too much of a surprise, as the group has increasingly been criticised for its inaction in recent years. O.C. Young reports.
The world's oil-producing cartel ended its ministerial meeting Thursday without reaching an agreement on oil production levels. Ministers from the 13 OPEC members discussed reintroducing a collective ceiling on crude output, an idea backed by Saudi Arabia and its allies, but the proposal was met with a firm no from Iran.
I think it's not secret that Iran, they still want to produce their pre-sanction quantity, and also we have another country is missing from the market, Libya. So to come up with a number, it's very difficult to do. But at this time now, the number that we are producing is reasonable to the market is accepting it.
Despite the lack of a deal, the ministers expressed optimism about the global market's recovery, noting that prices have rallied 80% since January. But with production still high and unfettered, oil prices are hovering at around $50 a barrel, less than half the level seen before OPEC countries increased their output to defend their global market share. The subdued prices are a major cause of concern for the so-called Fragile Five nations: Algeria, Iraq, Libya, Nigeria and Venezuela. The lack of an outcome adds to the mounting doubts surrounding the cartel's relevance in the world due to its inability to take coordinated action. OPEC's previous meeting in February also failed to agree upon a production limit after the member countries abandoned their cap of 30 million barrels a day in December. The next ministerial meeting will be held in November. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's foreign exchange reserve dipped in May after rising for 2 consecutive months in March and April. According to the Bank of Korea, the country's reserves stood at $370.9 billion in May, down $1.58 billion from the previous month. The central bank partly attributes the drop to a cut in the value of non-US dollar assets. In May, the euro traded at $1.11 to the euro, compared with $1.14 from a month earlier. Foreign reserves held in overseas securities dropped by nearly $6 billion from the previous month, while overseas deposits added over $4 billion over the cited period. Korea is set to roll out a new set of policies to address the rising levels of fine dust in the country, which have set off alarms about the potential public health consequences. The policies are being discussed at a meeting chaired by Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn and attended by 8 ministers, including the Ministers of Finance and the Environment. The measures are expected to focus on tightening regulations on diesel cars and shutting down coal power plants that are more than 40 years old. The outcome of the meeting will be announced in about 2 hours' time, and we'll have all the details for you on that in our next newscast at 3 p.m. Korea time. Now, Na Hong-jin's supernatural thriller The Wailing is set for wide release in the United States and Canada following its box office success here in Korea. The movie premiered in Korea in mid-May and has since attracted nearly 6 million viewers here. It was screened out of competition at the Cannes Film Festival on May 18th and opened for limited release in Los Angeles on May 20th. The movie, also known by its Korean title Goksong, has won rave reviews from international critics who have praised Na's distinctive direction and visual style. The movie's complex storyline combines religious elements from Korean shamanism, Japanese Buddhism and Christianity. Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday afternoon here in Seoul. We do have more news for you at 3 p.m. Korea time in a little under 3 hours from now. But in the meantime, please do stay tuned to Arirang TV. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.